Humanize AI movement that I've started is really just looking at it from both sides, right? We need to humanize AI for the human, but we also have to do the reverse for the AI. I'm classically trained in design thinking and human-centered design. And at that point, I was like, aha, that's the unique approach that we need to take. Because the technology is going to continue to change. There's going to be a new innovation. There's going to be a new tool. You should put yourself at the center of it.
I'm over here speaking about these topics. I'm in the weeds of this. I'm in depth. And I saw your presentations and I'm like, wow, I don't even know half of that, right? And so, but I always took it with the space of opportunity, right? I'm like, oh wow, I just have to be much more curious about this, right?
If you just started with the human first, you could solve just about anything in this world. Let's start with education, and let's start challenging these builders to make things more accessible on both sides.
Well, welcome back to the Future Human Experience. I am so excited to have a very special guest with us today, Danny Robles, the founder and chief strategist of Intentify, a company that's committed on humanizing the technology experience and creating business intent. Danny, bienvenido. Welcome to the Future Human Experience.
Thank you for having me, Eric. This is awesome. I really appreciate everything that you're doing. Really looking forward to see what conversation we have and see if we can, get some ideas going.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I was so inspired. We had a chance to meet not too long ago, and I got to see not only the work that you're doing, the work that you're leading, but more importantly, the vision that you have on the human side of AI adoption, right? Over the last few years, we've been overwhelmed by this new era of AI. So I thought it would be interesting to start our conversation with that. Like, what was your moment that you're like, oh my God, AI is now a culturally relevant thing, even though you've been in this space for some time, I've been in this space for some time. But what was that one moment that you're like, oh wow, like this is something that's gonna change the world?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, we were doing a lot of AI type activities underneath the hood. And obviously when ChatGPT came out, it was in February 2022, it was available to the masses, right? So that's when you had, my sisters asking me what's going on with ChatGPT. My daughter started asking about it. And then you started getting some of our clients kind of coming to us instead of us coming to them and explaining why it's important for them. So I remember sitting there and we're looking at everything that's happening with ChatGPT, seeing how quickly the adoption went up. I think it was like 5 million users in 5 days, which is ridiculous. And so as we started looking at that, I remember sitting there with my technical partner at that time at the organization I was at before, and we're like, okay, we need to figure some way to help people understand it, right? A lot of organizations were just kicking the tires, as we called it. And that was one of the first times we really thought about how do we start educating, because people need to understand, right? Whereas AI was happening behind the scenes, it was something that you didn't have to think about. Now you can interact with it. So that was that moment where like, okay, we could probably create something here. And so that's where we started building out this whole education and ideation to help organizations identify how do they see themselves inside of AI, not necessarily just looking at ChatGPT and understanding and figuring out what questions should I ask it or things like that. So that was that moment that, like when other people beyond just the nerds that I hung out with, the technical nerds, and the CIOs and the CTOs, all of a sudden the CMO and not just your CEO, but it was also people around you, my friends, my family, that were saying, hey, what's going on with all this stuff from ChatGPT? Have you heard of it? Things like that. So
that's cool. That's cool to recognize that you're right. It's the family, it's the community. It's when they're the ones that reach out to you because they see us not only as the experts, but as someone that says, hey, I'm here in the tech sector. And they're like, well, Danny should know about this, or Eric should know about this. And no, that's a fact. I mean, I'm sure we all have those moments, and I'm sure our listeners as well are probably reflecting on that too. Like, what was that moment for all of you? And of course, if you have any insights of that, please feel free to share those in the comments or however you're watching this as well. With that said, Danny, I love also that you're building a business now molded around that education piece, right? They're sharing that. Yes, all these tools are out there. All these tools are fantastic, but how we utilize them, how we use them intentionally, how we use it to expand the work that we are aspiring to do is really what matters. And I've had a chance to see one of your talks too, most recently too, and you have this amazing list of all these tools that are out there now, and you're committed to, okay, all these tools are out there, but not all the tools are intended for what you're working on. So let me help you get there. Help us a little bit more understand not only what inspired you to get into that space, but two, how's that journey been so far in working with customers and working with folks that are trying to navigate this AI world?
Yeah, and so I think, I worked with enterprise organizations, and they had more access to tools. They had more access to smart people that could help guide them. And then there was also industry leaders that were saying, here are the tools that you should use. And so as I went out on my own, as I was walking through the community, going to various events, I started seeing a gap where the education wasn't quite there. Everybody was just tinkering with all these tools. The next day there was another tool. The next day, all of a sudden there's a new launch over here. There's a new LLM, a new integration that you can do. And I really saw that there was no guidance as to understanding, put yourself at the center of this. And really just started looking at that. And I saw a gap there. And then I started doing a little bit of research, and then you start learning that, AI, the innovation in AI is outpacing adoption. And so I'm like, oh my God, there's an opportunity here. And so that's when I started really looking at how do I make everything that's available to these Fortune 500 enterprise level organizations to the everyday person. Because we really need to figure out how do we close that gap. And so really looking at that. And so ultimately, now that I started kind of looking and really working with the community, their eyes light up whenever they see that list of AI tools. And I'm like, that's great, but it's a little overwhelming once you see it and you're like, oh my God, where do I start? And that's where, a lot of I call it my classically trained, because now it's, AI can do a lot of this stuff and you can use it as your companion and your partner. But I'm classically trained in design thinking and human-centered design. And at that point, I was like, aha, that's the unique approach that we need to take, because the technology is going to continue to change. There's going to be a new innovation. There's going to be a new tool. You should put yourself at the center of it. So that's where I started coming out with Humanize AI. It goes both ways.
So Danny, with this work at Intentify, and not only work with, going into these communities, going to these organizations, leading these education efforts, I'm sure you've had several aha moments that these clients have had, where these experiences, they're like, oh my God, I could see this world just a little bit differently now, and I know how to apply these new tools that Danny and his team have been helping me with. And I'm sure you go cross multiple industries as well. Mm-hmm. But with that said, what can you share with us today that's just been the story that's stuck with you, that you're like, wow, this is really cool work?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest stories, so one of the things that I really found really impactful is, and ultimately you can solve anything if you have the right people in the room. Mm-hmm. And if you start with the people first, before you start designing a solution or executing and finding ways to solve their problems, you want to bring them all into understanding and create that empathy to understand where they're at. And so with that, we were executing on some really high level strategies from a data strategy perspective, and then from an AI perspective at an enterprise level. And so one of the successes that I had was bringing in high level talented people that were really close to the problem, and then that understood different aspects of it. And we were able to really just create a commonality, create a foundation of understanding within that problem, and then have a shared view of that within the complexity of creating a data model. So it was a large mining organization that operates here in Arizona, and they were looking at partnering up with Caterpillar to bring in an autonomous vehicle. Oh, wow. And they had already been, you had individual pieces of the organization already really far deep into already identifying, like, what's the data that needs to be part of that? What are the things that we need to introduce to mine in order to introduce this autonomous vehicle into this environment? What we did is we created a 1.5-day workshop where we identified and brought everybody in, everyone that was part of it, from the drivers to the dispatchers to the site managers, all the way up to maybe even the executives that were reporting up to leadership, right? And so what we did is we really brought everybody, and we had a human experience, right? And it's not necessarily Excel sheets and notes and emails. No, let's just pause for a second. This is a really important endeavor that this company's taking. Let's bring everybody together so we have a clear understanding of where we're headed, and then identify some of the gaps and risks that maybe were not thought through as you had these siloed conversations. So I think the key is to bring people together, and then ultimately the eyes just light up, the synapses kind of connect, and we shorten a lot of that communication. So that's where I really saw that if you just started with the human first, you could solve just about anything in this world. And so knowing and looking at that and having proof of that, as I started looking at the community and as we now have this new power of AI, I saw a lot of people kind of not really understanding where to go. They were giving incorrect information. Maybe they weren't even receiving it. So that's when I started really looking at that. And it's like you see the success from an enterprise level. And then now I've started Intentify, and it's really focused on like how do we take some of that ideology and that methodology, but then make it available to the masses. Start with education, and then ultimately work with them to understand that. And so some of those examples is you had talked about earlier is that you've been you've attended some of my presentations and some of my workshops, and I really want people to embrace the power that they now have with AI. And really look at that. And I could see people's individuals, leaders, entrepreneurs, everyday people, their eyes just light up the moment they see themselves in the problem. And so it's really just making sure that you identify who's going to be benefiting from this, and then start there. And the rest of it, the path just clears up, and you don't have to, you really identify and are very targeted on how you're going to move forward. So
yeah. And Danny, what I love about your approach too, and I'll be very transparent and open. Like I'm over here speaking about these topics. I'm in the weeds of this. I'm in depth, and I saw your presentations, and I'm like, wow, I don't even know half of that, right? And so, but I always took it with the space of opportunity, right? I'm like, oh wow, I just have to be much more curious about this, right? Like, and that, in my opinion, I think is a superpower that we need today, right? Just being much more curious and intentional, right? And I think the example that you bring in on that you put all these experts in the room, right? From the person that's literally driving the vehicle and says, I've been doing this for years, I know exactly how this gets done, to the engineer or to the site manager saying, hey, we're experts in this space, but they were open enough and you created the space enough to say, hey, you know what? There's still all these things that either we don't know how we all work together, or we could just learn a little bit more. And I think if you are listening to this and you have an opportunity to attend Danny's workshops or connect with him on LinkedIn, he leaves you with that empowerment. And in that space, I'm very grateful for you on leading this type of work, because not only you share with us this massive space, but you share with us, like you said, where we could be part of this journey too along. We leave empowered, and that's really what a thoughtful leader does, and a thoughtful person in this space. So just wanted to give you that props, Danny, as well. With that said, Danny, what are we underestimating in this world of AI, right? It seems that, like you said, there's a headline every day, there's a launch every other day, there's a regulation every other day, there's a country doing this, a country doing that. What are we underestimating from your perspective in this new world of AI?
Well, as we know, the innovation's outpacing adoption for the first time of any other innovation that's come in, right? So I think a lot of leaders, if you're sitting on the sidelines and saying, I still got some time and I don't need to worry about this right now, I think that's the biggest one, right? That you have some time to figure this out. I think the other part is, making sure that you start understanding that it's not just AI is only one piece of it. Like when we're talking about these LLMs, unless you're an OpenAI or Anthropic or Google Gemini, if you're working on those teams, you're working on these LLMs and training them and things like that. But as organizations, you need to make sure that your data is where it needs to be. And so a lot of this work is really just really understanding that it's not a silver bullet. You still need to bring the people with you, and then you need to make sure how do I integrate this into my day to day. And I could go through a list of misconceptions. I think there's definitely in how you start using it, but there's some misconceptions on what's copyrighted and what's trademarked. Like there's a lot of
Yeah, and Danny, what I find interesting about even that approach too, or highlighting that it feels that folks are either saying, hey, you know what, I'll catch up when I catch up. When you have an opportunity to start building this muscle, like I was sharing with you, just seeing you do your work, that's a muscle you need today. Like you just need to know that feeling not left behind necessarily, but feeling that there's so much to look forward to is really a superpower as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as someone that's navigating all these changes, is saying like, it's okay to be a few iterations behind as long as I'm on the journey to be there, right? Because the world is moving at an accelerated pace. That's not gonna change. Right. Sterling Hawkins, a good friend of ours, shares that the slowest pace of change you'll ever feel is today. And so you can imagine what that means for customers, what that means for leaders, for parents, for educators, right? And so having an AI strategy, having a strategy on how we are continuously learning into this space matters a lot. And I think Intentify is right there in the middle of that as well. With that said though too, if we haven't understand what we're underestimating in this world of AI, what are we overestimating then? What are we just like, okay, this is an exaggeration of where AI is gonna go. Come on, let's calm down. Like what do you think is the overestimating side of AI?
I would say is the fact that there's not gonna be any human control, right? Like the fact that you just said it and it goes, does do things for you. Like it's like Matthew McConaughey sitting there, like the commercial right now is like, he's sitting there and he's like figuring out like, okay, I should have, having something that's going to just make decisions on your, and basically take over your jobs, right? I think that's kind of like we're overestimating that in the sense is that we still have a lot of work to do before we get to that future. And it's really just looking at and to your point is like, how do I take the next step, right? And take that step in adoption and start using it maybe within a task and with my organization, maybe start with a task within me personally, right? And it's really just understanding like what's the level of risk that you're trying to take from there. So there's definitely some overestimation on that side. And I think it's gonna be more practical use cases that really bring that, the benefit that you need and then also the control that, the organizations need in order to execute on AI.
No, and that's a fantastic point too, Dan. I mean, that human side of the work or the jobs that we have today, I think, it'll be fascinating, right, to be back in, 50, 60 years ago, right, when we were having some additional innovations and people were just as concerned at that time. And it doesn't mean that we need to underestimate that or discourage that. But the reality is that sometimes we ourselves as humans do not know what that could unlock as well, right? I'm just thinking right now, there was a statistic the other day that YouTube is now the most watched channel basically on the planet, right? Like more people are watching YouTube than your standard TV. We still don't have half of the people connected to the internet and YouTube is already there. But you can imagine even now students saying, what do I want to be when I grow up? Well, some of them say, I want to be a YouTuber, right? And just imagine now what that particular platform has unlocked economically, from jobs to communities to tourism. I mean, you call it whatever, you could probably find, even education, right? There's certain education pieces that have been unlocked because of a platform like that. Some other things that probably would have not wanted to unlock as well, but that comes with the territory of innovation. So that's a fantastic perspective that, yes, humans, we don't know what's gonna come next, but it's not gonna come after us. Right. It's gonna unlock certain elements of us that we probably have not foreseen yet, and it's ripe for discovery and for creativity. Well, Danny, as we're getting close to wrap up, something that we love to have with our guests is also ask them to come up with a surprise question, a blind question that I have no idea what's coming. But I've had a great time talking to you, getting a chance to connect with you over the last few months that we've built a relationship. But Feel free to share with me right now with our audience. What is the question you have for me?
Yeah, so, with today's topic around how AI is going to impact the human experience, I was thinking about, what are those unintended experiences that you had that maybe shaped you, that you're hoping that we don't prevent our future kids or your kids from experiencing, that might be able to shape them and into the people that you would want them to be.
That's cool. No, and that's great because we also have shared passion for our little ones too. Yeah, I mean, some of the unintentional consequences that I recall just having technology is that it is an open platform, right? And our ability to navigate into certain areas of either misinformation or we go down these rabbit holes that sometimes are not the most productive to do. That is one of the things I learned early on. I'm like, wow, I need to build a skill set to help navigate this. So something as simple as this was, I just turned off notifications. I have 0 notifications on my phone. People to reach me sometimes becomes somewhat of a challenge. So if there's a great product that people know of saying like my wife could still reach me or my parents could still reach me at a certain frequency, that'll be great. But I have not been able to find that yet. But for example, that is one of the things. Like I just don't want to be controlled by the technology. I want to lead with the technology. And so that's been a muscle I have built over the last few years. Now, granted, that's something I've been able to do. I know it's not probably possible for everyone. I remember when I was part of this big organization, leading a global team, you're connected 24/7, right? You have your Europe team online, you have your Asia team online, and you have your Americas team online at one point in the day, even on Sundays, right? And so for me, I remember it was that moment that I was just getting pinged all the time that I wasn't making space for my family or for the day I was missing those moments, right? And so that's one of the things I want to be much more intentional with. And I want to make sure my kids see that too, right? If my kids see me all the time doing this or doing that, they're learning that behavior. And so that's one of the things I want to make sure that as we create these awesome technologies that are always around us, we're still being much more intentional with building that human experience first, that make sure we're having those experiences that are much more thoughtful to do. So yeah, that would be my answer to that, yeah.
Something came up
Sure.
in that moment, right?
Yeah.
Like, once technology and AI become invisible, like how are we gonna, there's some challenges here, right? Like how you were able to turn off those notifications, how are we gonna be able to turn off and have our children be aware that they're being influenced by AI in a sense, and this experience. It's gonna be very interesting and I love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think this goes back to what our lived experiences are, right? I think technology has this fantastic way of creating this, one size fit all, saying, hey, if we just deploy this framework, man, everyone could have these same experiences that maybe the designers were thinking when they created it. And the reality is that what we're starting to learn is that that's not how the world works, right? Just because it works fantastic in Silicon Valley doesn't mean it's going to work great in Costa Rica or in Peru or in Thailand, right? Everyone has their own lived experiences and cultural experiences. And so as the world gets much more connected, I love even the work that you're doing with Intentify, is that you're literally bringing everyone into the room physically in the mining story. But as we get more digitized, it's going to literally give us an opportunity to digitally bring everyone into the room, right? And so you have the people from Thailand, from Singapore, from Ecuador, from Mexico, from New York, all raising their hands saying, this is how I experience technology. And so I think if you're able to thoughtfully build technology that way, it's not about necessarily how am I avoiding my customers to not see AI. It's how am I helping my customers have a truly rich lived experience, right? Because if you're just trying to hide things around them, you're really just incentivized by the short term. But if you're truly trying to build something that's going to be lasting, man, you're bringing everyone into the room. And that's really what matters. And I think that mindset as we're building technologies, as we're building organizations in this 21st century, I understand the incentive systems are very short term, but if you just have that little bit of a different approach and saying, I could build something that's much more long-standing, I'm telling you right now, you're going to build something that's not only going to be sustainable, but it's going to be much more meaningful in the long term. And your business will outlast any of these rapid changes because you built something that was human-centered. Yeah. Yeah. So with that said, Danny, we're wrapping up with human-centered. I would love to learn just a little bit more about you as we take this away for our listeners. You've been leading this Humanize AI movement. Tell us a little bit more about what that means to you, but also how could people connect into that movement that you've been starting?
Yeah. So I think the Humanize AI movement that I've started is really just looking at it from both sides, right? So as looking at it from you as a human being at the center of this experience, we're going to need to make sure that you're aware of all the underlying pieces that make up AI. And so when you're interacting, there's a lot of challenges that we're going to have to face. And how do you give trustworthiness to these AI tools? Right now, everybody's just jumping in and running in and just, it really is it's the Wild West, right? Like just go in, whoa, there's a new tool. Okay, let me give my information so I could do whatever it does, and then I'm gonna believe everything that it says. And so a lot of the things is like on one side you have to educate a lot of the people out there and understanding, but also we need to challenge the builders, the people that are building these tools, to create more accessibility to understand because if you look deep into this, there's some biases, there's some hallucinations that come out of that, and we need to be able to create trustworthiness. So as like Eric, you and I have been in the same room a couple of times, and you have a LinkedIn, and there's a socially accepted way that I can say, yes, I'm going to accept this invite from Eric, and I'm going to show up, and and he seems like a great guy. I've created some trustworthiness, and then based on your experience, you're given some trustworthiness as well, right? You worked for a large organization. I worked for a large organization. We've created these norms to validate whether or not we should trust people. I don't think that's happened as a society now, and a lot of that is not accessible. And so we need to figure out how do we humanize that accessibility. So it's not just the developers or the engineers or the data scientists that can create that, but we need to create that awareness. And then on the flip side, we need to right now AI, it's not your what we call artificial general intelligence. It's not really intelligent in the sense that it's predicting the future. And so we're looking at the past. It's using patterns and statistical information that says and tries to predict what comes next. And so with that, there's a lot of innate challenges and risks that happen because the problems of yesterday are not the problems of tomorrow. And so we're using data from yesterday to solve tomorrow. We're going to have to figure out how to inject AI with some of our human ethical and beliefs and things that we stand for. So on both sides, we need to humanize AI for the human, but we also have to do the reverse for the AI. So it's really just like figuring out and creating that movement of let's start with education and let's start challenging these builders to make things more accessible on both sides. So, but I'm curious because like I think I related to you because you have a Latino background, like let's call it like whatever, Latinx or whatever you want to call it. And so I grew up on the border of El Paso and Mexico, and I always like throughout my life, and I was talking to my wife about this, is like I've never found I belong either as an American or as a Mexican. And I'm curious, and I found that like even through my career, I was telling her, I was like, it's funny, even my career, like no one's ever been able to put me where I'm at. Like I'm like, no, I'm a designer, but no, I'm actually a UX designer. Oh no, now I'm a UX designer, but now I'm a product strategist. And I was just curious if you had the same experience,
Yeah, you're right. For me, and sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional, right? Because it is a lived experience, right, that most of us have. When we have we're first generation here, you don't know where you're at, right? And I remember growing up in Houston and being parents of Ecuatorianos and having that, they're like, yeah, you're American, but not really, right? And then I remember then moving to Ecuador at the age of 11, and then being the American in the room and saying, yeah, but my parents are Ecuadorian. I said, yeah, you're Ecuadorian, but not really, right? And I remember just kind of feeling that sense of like out of place. But what I've realized now as an adult is like that's very common, right, for a lot of folks. And what happened to me in the 7th grade was my computer lab opened up for the very first time, and it had the internet. And that's when I was like, all these borders, all these places that we've designed physically are now slowly going to start disappearing, and we will be part of a digital space. Not saying I'm going to have a digital avatar and I'm going to live there and like Second Life, but it was more about, wow, like I'm a human citizen. I'm a world citizen. It's, you know, these labels, these passports will come and go, but my ability to connect with everyone on the planet has now become accessible. And I think that for me was like my aha moment. I'm like, this is who I am. And those labels, that's fine. I don't need to consider those labels, but I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to be first generation. I'm proud to be Ecuadoriano too, right? And but I feel like that technology place is really what helped me understand that a little bit more as a child. And that's what I always greatly appreciate. And that's why I truly do believe, and I shared this post the other day, right? That what I've realized over the last few months of doing this work is the future human experience is not a title. It's not me creating all these data. It's my story. And what I've realized is that if I'm able to lean into my story, that's what makes me unique. That's what makes my story valuable. And it doesn't make it more valuable than someone else's story. It becomes what I've realized when I'm on the stages too and sharing, especially my intersection story. I've had Latina and Latinos come up to me afterwards saying, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that, because you're the first person that talks about innovation or AI that I've seen on a stage and talks about their abuelita.
Yeah, that's great.
Right? And so that for me, like when I started leaning into that, I'm like, wow, there's something here that I need to, yes, I could talk about all the AI statistics, which are great, but if I could bring why I care about this work, that makes a difference, right? And that's what I saw with you when I saw you present, and I was like, no, there's something here that Danny's doing. And there is that relationship too, right? I'm like, wow, there's someone else. So, because this stuff matters, right?
Yeah.
It matters how we bring ourselves to these stages. It matters how we bring ourselves and our stories into this work. So, man, bro, like I'm saying, thank you so much for being here with us. It was a blast.
Appreciate you answering that.
Yeah,
Man.
all right, yeah,
Thanks.
you got it, yeah. Hey everyone, this is Eric, the host of the Future Human Experience. The reason why this podcast was created was to be a platform for others to really bring these conversations to life. So if you're enjoying this content, please like and subscribe. It will really help our channel and expose these ideas for others. Thank you.